I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisibility, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I want to thank my friend and musician David Freeman of Homer, Alaska for that beautiful and stirring rendition of the Star-Spangled Banner. You're listening to Alaska Matters Radio. Christopher Story here, your host for great adventures in this last frontier. David Webb up there at the mothership of KPEN FM 102. We're online on topoftheworldradio.com. On topoftheworldradio.com. That's the official website powered by GTL Web Designs. The program is brought to you in part by I was going to say on Top of the World Radio, yes, but it's brought to you in part by Horizon Satellite, Horizon Wireless, without which we'd not be able to communicate and close the loop with their high-speed upload and download, super fast wireless internet. Check them out. 226-3130, 226-3130. Stop in to their brand new location on Pioneer Avenue and see what they can do for you. Dish Network, DirecTV, and wireless internet. That's Horizon Satellite. Horizon Satellite, 226-3130. Alaskan Mindbender today on the program. A little bit of a controversial one. Sort of. And maybe not. It kind of is. Also on the program, a friend of mine from a long time ago who is now a big-time city detective in Seattle. Her name is Jennifer Samson. She's a detective policewoman in Seattle, the city of Seattle, and it's been on my mind lately. Now, see, I missed the Super Bowl halftime show, or the anti-police halftime show, as it turned out to be, apparently, by Beyonce. I didn't see it. I haven't really paid attention to it, but this has nothing to do with that. Bringing Jennifer Samson, the detective from Seattle, it has nothing to do with that. However, it couldn't be better timing to celebrate what it is that police actually do for you and I. And so Jennifer Samson's my guest following the 1 o'clock news. Oil and gas expert. He's actually a publisher of a very popular blog called Alaska Oil and Gas, Thoughts on Alaska Oil and Gas. His name is Brad Keithley. He's an attorney. He's a consultant. And in fact, 5 days ago, he was before the Senate Affairs Committee. I saw his testimony there and said, you know what? I want to get Brad back on the program, and he's going to be talking to us today. Well, in a nutshell, what was he doing in Juneau with the Senate Affairs Committee? Also, how did we get to a $5 billion budget, and under what circumstances will the permanent fund be the solution, in his opinion? He is an expert. Again, Thoughts on Oil and Gas with Brad Keithley with Keithley Consulting. All that and more coming up here on Alaska Matters Radio. In just a moment, I'm going to introduce you to my friend, Detective Jennifer Samson from Seattle, Washington, formerly of Homer, Alaska. How did a small-town girl end up being a big-time city cop in Seattle? Well, you'll find out. It's an interesting story, and I think it's really my intent in getting Jen on the program was really to get an inside scoop on what is going on inside the police department across America, but how can... Well, I'll let you listen to it. I think it's pretty interesting. I had this conversation yesterday. I think you're going to really enjoy it, and it's very insightful. I wanted to look at policing from a police person's perspective, and so I thought, who better than Jen Samson, detective in Seattle, Washington. First, Alaskan Mindbender, brought to you by Blackwater Bend Espresso. When good won't do, get gourmet brew at Blackwater Bend Espresso. Custom roasted beans, that's what we grind and brew at home. Truly the best cup of coffee. Had the whole family over for what's gone from Sunday night dinners to Monday night dinners for a little while. Had them all over last night. Made Don Blackwell a cup of Blackwater Bend Espresso. He took a sip, and he's very erudite in the way he drinks and approaches coffee, and he sort of cups it like a sommelier of coffee, if you will. And he's like, I don't know if he knows what he's doing or talking about, but when he said, this is an amazing cup of coffee, it must be Blackwater Bend, I said, bingo, bingo, you got it. Blackwater Bend Espresso, not your average drip. Here's the question. It's participatory. It's your opinion, which you'll notice that of late, these are becoming more of an opinion. So there's no reason not to participate. There's no wrong answer. And I want to take you to the land of NIMBY. Not in my backyard. The land of NIMBY, where we all live, if we are honest with each other. We all live in NIMBY. I'm for everything. Wait a minute. Not in my backyard. What do you mean you're going to put a halfway house in my backyard? What you talking about? What you talking about, Willis? All right. So would you support community-wide banning of commercial pot? So commercial cultivation, manufacturing, retail sales. Would you support, wherever your community is, would you support community-wide banning of the commercial pot industry within your city or community? Let's make it as blanket as you want to be, because you might be living in no man's land and don't really have a city, and I want you to still weigh in on it. 299-7653. You can explain your answer or just a yes or no. It's simple. What would you, or would you support a community-wide ban of marijuana cultivation and retail sales, et cetera, and manufacturing, whole nine, inside your community? Text me now, 299-7653. 299-7653. Last night in Homer, Alaska, the city council took up an ordinance, and it was introduced by Heath Smith, and in fact, that's what the ordinance would do, would ban commercial marijuana sales and manufacturing in the city limits of Homer. Next week, my guest will be Chad Matthews. Chad is a transplant from California. Now he's a local businessman, community man, and concerned man, and a business owner, property owner, et cetera, in the city of Homer, Alaska. And he's openly speaking out and debating for the ban of the commercial sales of marijuana and so forth in Homer. And I'm looking actually for an alternate to this debate for next week. So Chad Matthews will be arguing pro-ban, and we'll find somebody who is against the ban, and maybe they have some cogent reasons as to their opinion. 299-7653. Would you or would you not support a community-wide ban of commercial marijuana in your community? Now, please meet my friend Jen Samson, detective with the Seattle Police Department, as we discuss how and why she became a cop. Bloods. I personal confession, is my favorite show, basically, on television, maybe ever. So do you as a detective ever watch it?
I've seen maybe one or two episodes, but I will tell you, amongst cops, that is probably one of the most, if not the most popular show to watch.
Oh, okay. I wondered, because, it could be totally dramatized, or it could be a little bit. I want to imagine that it's a little bit of a reality just because of the way it's handled. It's such a good show.
The camaraderie and the relationship between the officers and the prosecutors is pretty spot on. It's pretty realistic.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. I'm not wasting my Friday nights. Excellent. Well,
not at all.
Detective Samson, take us back, though, to where you grew up and how you go from there to a police officer in Seattle. What started your journey towards becoming a police officer?
Well, I was always interested in law. I initially had expressed interest and wanted to go into law and be an attorney. And everybody that I spoke to that was an attorney said, don't do it. It's not glamorous. It's a lot of paperwork. It's not like Law and Order. But I also love to teach. My mom was a teacher and taught for many, many years. And so I grew up with that in my life. And life as it goes, I moved to Anchorage and worked for a couple of years. I worked in retail, and I followed my boyfriend at the time from Anchorage down to North Seattle and Edmond, took some community college classes, and then could not afford school and working, so I dropped out of school and started working. I moved up fairly quickly in management with the Bond, which is now Macy's. I had a daughter. I have a beautiful daughter who's now a sophomore down in college in Texas, and I just knew that I was not able to provide the life that I wanted for her working retail, and I applied for the psychology department at UW, and I also applied to be a police officer, and everything fell into place at once for the police department, and I applied and got hired, and I met my husband in the academy. We were in academy romance, and that's all she wrote, and I've been here for 17 years now with the department.
Wow, that is terrific. And so your love of law, what was that about, do you think?
Well, in high school it was different for me in that I wanted a distinguishable career that I felt would make a difference. I wrote a lot of papers. I had Mr. Holcomb, who was hands down probably one of my favorite teachers. God rest his soul. He's not with us anymore. And he really challenged me in our, I believe it was U.S. history class. And he challenged us on issues and brought up legal issues. I remember there was we talked about Roe versus Wade and all of these things. And we really got into some pretty spirited debates. And I just remember feeling really passionate about it and wanting to make a difference. And, on that same hand, I wanted to teach. And I think when you're involved with law, there's a part when you're involved with law, whether it's prosecution or defense or being a police officer, you not only have to know the law, you have to uphold the law, but then part of being in those positions is to educate others of those laws. And I think that maybe that's where part of the teaching part came in for me. I do a lot of instruction for the department in the field of domestic violence, so I kind of have the best of both worlds right now.
And so you're a young police officer in Seattle, and you're on the streets. I mean, did you ever have were you a beat cop? Were you on the streets of Seattle enforcing law?
Yes. I was one of two females, I think, for the majority of my patrol career that worked nights in the Rainier Valley, which is arguably one of the roughest, toughest areas in the city. I worked with a partner the majority of the time who was a former Army Ranger. He's now on the SWAT team. I was very blessed to work with a squad that we had tremendous camaraderie, and we were very tactically sound and very tactically trained. So I had the privilege of working with them, and we did barbecues together. We went out on the boat together. We had Christmas parties together. We were very, very fortunate to have a great working relationship. And I learned a lot. I was very fortunate to work down there because we went from shooting calls to, a burglary to a dope call to a warrant arrest to a domestic violence call. And demographically, just the way the city works, we overwhelmingly got dispatched to a lot of domestic violence calls. The policy at Seattle Police Department is, unless it's say it's a theft of mail or something, that would be a one-officer call. All the other calls, especially domestic violence calls, it's a minimum of a two-officer response. And because my partner and I were a two-officer car, we got dispatched to a lot of those, and we just became very proficient in domestic violence investigations, and that led my path to being in the domestic violence unit today.
My understanding is that essentially, like me, you want to go home at night. And I think, as I look across the landscape of our country, I think every cop, by and large, police officer. By the way, is it okay to say cop? Is that offensive, or do you guys call each other cops?
We say cops.
Okay, all right. So cops across the country want to go home at night. That seems to be the fundamental, in addition to what you said, making a difference, enforcing law, and being a peace officer. You want to go home at night. So describe that. You're going to a call. You don't know what you're going to encounter. Fundamentally, how present of mind are you that you want to go home tonight to your family?
Well, safety is paramount, irregardless, for me and my partner. So whenever we're going into a situation and it's an unknown, we are going to take utmost caution in going in and evaluating that situation. And sometimes the public doesn't understand the dangers that are presented to us and the threats that are presented to us. So we may go into a home and somebody has their hand in their pocket, and it may just seem very mundane and routine, and we ask them to take their hands out of their pocket. They may they may think that that's very extreme, but they don't know what we have gone through. They don't know the threats that have been presented to us. They don't know that 6 weeks ago we had an officer that had a gun pulled on him with somebody that had their hand in their pocket. So it's, we just ask. We don't ask things without good reason, and we do it to be safe. That's why compliance is so important with officers. Just do what's asked of you and comply, and 99% of the problems will resolve without issue. And that's I think the main problem is that with all of these incidents that have been in the press, the majority of them have been instigated due to the suspect or subject not complying with what the officer needs them to do.
What do you think is most misunderstood today as you are a police officer, peace officer there and a detective in Seattle, looking across the country, knowing what you travel internationally, training other police officers. Just in America, though, what do you think is most fundamentally misunderstood about your work, what you do, your intentions, and police officers in general? So what do you think is most misunderstood?
I would say...
What? What would Detective Jen Samson say? Also, what role does the media play in police work in America today? Find out when we come back here to Alaska Matters Radio. I'm Chris Story, and you're listening to Alaska Matters Radio, what my mom calls the greatest show on earth. David Webb is your engineer and producer back up at the mothership, turning all the dials, bringing all the smiles. Make it, oh man, that's cheesy. Edit that out. Don't let that go across the airwaves. You are listening to Alaska Matters Radio, brought to you in part by Blackwater Bend Espresso, and they sponsor the Alaskan Mindbender. Question on the table today, very pertinent. We're visiting the land of NIMBY. Not in my backyard. Would you support a community-wide ban of commercial pot growing, cultivation, manufacturing, retail sales, anything commercial? Would you support a ban of community-wide cultivation of pot or sales, etc.? 299-7653, 299-7653. In Homer, Alaska, we're having this conversation officially. There are two ordinances that are under scrutiny right now that are before you. You have an opportunity in Homer to weigh in on it officially. And I'm asking you everywhere, what do you think? 299-7653. Would you, if given an opportunity to support a ban on commercial activities respecting marijuana, would you do it? Would you support it? We go back now to the second half of my conversation with Seattle Police Detective Jen Samson, and we're going to be finding out what do you and I potentially misunderstand about police work in America. Your work, what you do, your intentions, and police officers in general. So what do you think is most misunderstood?
I would say a huge problem that has gotten worse just in the last 5 years is what's portrayed in the media. They don't clear up confusion even after it's been clarified, so it perpetuates this, I don't want to say a falsehood, but the media doesn't fully understand, therefore they put it out, and then the public believes it because it's on the news. That's probably, I would say the majority of Americans are pro-police, and they love the police, but there's a small minority that gets catered to and gets plastered all over the media, and that's what people hear. Therefore, that's what they start to, it resonates with them, and they start to believe it. And that's probably the frustrating, probably a very frustrating thing for me. A lot of the public, they're not familiar with police tactics, and nor should they be unless, they've been handled by law enforcement. I would love to see the trust be put back into letting us do our jobs without fear of having it being plastered all over the media or fear of being written up or fear of getting a complaint. That's been a problem. I would probably say one of our biggest enemies is what's portrayed in the media.
And the media, Jen, you have to expand to probably social media today because that's where I think it's so easy to get, and this is just me looking in from the outside, to look at a video of a police-involved shooting or some sort of a takedown, whatever it is, and at just that minute and a half or 90 some odd seconds on YouTube, and then the next one feeds in, and the next one, and the next one, you can really consume about an hour and a half worth of a video that would or could be portrayed in social media as we live in a police state. My God, they're out to get us. And it's so easily, I think we're so easily led into or it's just, as you said, portrayed. But I think to expand on your point, I'm just saying I think social media plays a role in that, which you and I, we can all control that. We can all have a voice in social media.
Correct. And what you will find, as, say with the Ferguson incident, there's small snippets that are played that can be inflammatory in out of context. But when you look at everything that's put together, it's a different story. But by the time the story is done and there's all this uproar, it's really hard, for, the media, very rare for the media to backtrack, like the Michael Brown Ferguson incident. It was proven. There were the suspect that was with him, his friend that was with him, gave a statement saying he never had his hands up. He lied. Mm-hmm. Why hasn't that, why didn't CNN or why didn't Fox or ABC News or CBS have that young man on and have him say, I'm sorry, I owe America an apology. I lied. It didn't happen. It never, but they don't do that. So now we still have people that are printing T-shirts saying hands up, don't shoot, when it never happened. So, it's frustrating. And social media, things will go hit Twitter or hit Facebook, and it just goes like crazy. And I just ask people to take the time to read and educate yourself, and don't just I see things forwarded all the time on Facebook that, somebody shares, and take the time to read it, and then maybe do a little research on the internet to see if what you're now posting is actually, does it have some truth to it?
What happens, aside from IA, which I like to say, right? I'd like to pick up a few terms from television. Aside from internal investigations and so forth, what would you say, what should put the average person's mind at ease that there is self-policing within the police departments in general? Very generally, I'm speaking. Just there is a sense of, hey, look, we want to police our own. There's always a bad egg or a bad apple that can get into any line of work. And we do police our own. Is there something you could do to assure us on that?
I will tell you, in all my years of being in law enforcement, when there's a bad apple or a bad egg or somebody, we get it everywhere we go. None of us approve of it. None of us like it. And when a cop does something wrong and gets busted, it's a black mark on all of us, and we loathe it. And none of us will tolerate illegal behavior or behavior, abusive behavior. We abhor it. And so with our complaint process, the majority of our complaints, given these new procedures and reforms that are in place with the Department of Justice, I would say over half, if not more, of our complaints that come into our internal investigation are generated internally. So there's a lot of self-policing. So I don't want the public to think, that there's all these bad apples and we're all just turning a blind eye. That's not true at all, because we want to do good. We want to do right. We are in this profession to help right the wrongs and to make a difference. And we're not going to tolerate that within our own.
What percentage do you think, or by your experience, what percentage are women in law enforcement?
I couldn't speak nationwide. I think on the Seattle Police Department, we have a little over 1,200 sworn, and I think we have 200 to 300 females.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's so you're talking to a 18-year-old girl, and she says, Detective Samson, I'm thinking about becoming a police officer. And what would you tell her?
You know what? I would encourage it. I would be very frank with her. I would be very honest with her. I would tell her that it's a completely different time than it was when I got hired on 17 years ago. But we need good police officers. We need good, strong females. She sets her mind to it. She can do it. I get asked when I teach, have you ever been discriminated against, or do you feel that there's sexism? My daughter's biracial. And, I tell them the same thing that, I tell my daughter. If you look for racism, you're going to find it. You look hard enough, you're going to find it. If I look for sexism, I'm going to find it. I don't. I come to work. I love what I do. I do my job. I do it to the best of my ability. I've earned the respect of all my coworkers. and I have fun. And that's what it's all about. If it's truly somebody's passion, then they're going to be drawn to it and they're going to love it. And as you know, anybody that's looking to go into law enforcement, we need good cops. And it's a thankless job. I've been a detective for 10 years now doing domestic violence investigations, and I've put a lot of bad guys behind bars, and I've helped a lot of women and men, and I've had two victims call me in 10 years to thank me. So it's a thankless job, but it's rewarding because you can make a difference. And I would encourage anybody that's interested in doing it, to take the plunge and do it. It's a very rewarding career, but it is. There are inherent dangers with it, and there are stressors that come with it. Got to take care of yourself. You got to be healthy. Got to work out. Got to take care of your mind and your heart and your body. Otherwise, you'll burn out fairly quickly. But I love what I do, and I'm very blessed because I make a good living, and I love what I do, and I love my coworkers, and I'm glad that the path led me to where it did.
Thank you for what you do. Thank you for your service to, and I mean this to say, I appreciate what police officers do for their communities and the states in which they work, but also as a nation. I think this is a ubiquitous from across the country, from Alaska. I'm saying thank you to you and in general to police officers everywhere. So thank you very much.
And thank you. I appreciate that.
You're listening to Alaska Matters Radio. That was Detective Jennifer Samson from the police department in Seattle. She was a former Homer resident, then Anchorage, and on to the big city. Coming up, Brad Keithley, thoughts on Alaska oil and gas. Is the dividend the solution to the budget? Find out.